right, and we're live, and the drinking will commence, people.
I'm drinking out of crystal. I'm the fancy guy here.
Oh no, dude! It's the least fancy decanter you can imagine.
I just received the glass that Tony Stark toasts Loki with in the Avengers.
But I did, however, make it clear ice, so I am fancy in that way.
Yeah.
Nice.
What are we toasting to?
To self-pub and indie people trying to make it out there. Keep grinding.
Those poor bastards. Keep going.
Oh, man. All right, so you all know me. No introduction needed if you're here. We have AR Witham out there, JCM Berne out there, and I will I'll do my first little plug so I can do my Brian Lee Durfee impression. All right, I am J.R. Carroll, writer of More Than a Vampire and More Than a Gunslinger. Up and coming, More Than a God War just released the cover yesterday.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful cover. Very nice.
All right, AR, you can plug all your stuff.
This all my stuff right there. Really, I mean, I'm not very far along in the journey. If you like adventure or read The Legend of Blackjack, you'll probably enjoy it. That's me.
All right. I'm JCM Berne. You can call me Joe, author of Wistful Asending and the rest of the Hybrid Helix. Should have 2 more books coming out in the next 3 or 4 months. Sooner. And
busy man.
Yeah. Releasing them at the same time was not a smart plan, but it's apparently the way it's working out. And you can find my website at jcmberne.com or my YouTube channel by just Googling or putting JCM Berne in the search bar or wherever that is around. Yes, you do. You need to read Wistful Asending. I mean,
Tony, you are 100% right. You do need to read it.
I'll back that up. We did the novella based on Wistful Asending's colors because I wanted to emulate Joe as much as possible. One of the great things about Wistful is that it's good for everybody. Like if you can stand sci-fi at all, like unless you're immediately turned off by sci-fi, this is good. The book is going to treat you well.
Yeah, well, and I did a thing, and I kind of said, like, if you're just coming back to fantasy or sci-fi and you want to jump in, Wistful Asending is a great place because you're not drowning people in like darkness, and
Neither Andy or I do, right? We're both on the not on the grimdark end of the spectrum.
No.
Except I'd say, I don't know, Andy. I don't think you call your stuff YA, but it's got a younger.
Well, it's YA. Yeah, it's YA except for all the stuff that people hate about YA.
It doesn't have the annoying parts of YA.
There's no love triangles. There's no ridiculously stupid decisions.
It's a book an adult can appreciate, but it's also a book you can hand a 12-year-old without being like,
yeah, oh my God. Read that, you're fine.
You can do that, right? That's total. I'm not
There's
sure.
pictures in it. Have fun.
Yeah. But neither of us are really on that grim end of the spectrum.
And Joe has a familiar rant against Grimdark, or about Grimdark, not against Grimdark.
Tell us how you really feel, Joe.
I have nothing against grimdark people who enjoy grimdark, but I have something against people who make the argument that if lots of characters aren't dying, there are no stakes, or there's no emotion to it. I'm like, look, in most of our daily lives, people aren't dying in droves or being tortured to death either. There are stakes. If you can't find stakes for your character that we care about, maybe you're not, you have a writing problem, not a problem, right? And I mean, nothing that there's wrong. There's anything wrong with having a dark story or life and death stakes. That's great. That's just not the only kind of story you can tell. But people sometimes treat it like it is. Like, if people aren't dying, nothing's happening. I'm like, dude, like, I hope that's not your attitude about your regular everyday life, because that would make commuting really rough, right?
Hey! I am an inner city mail carrier. Okay, if I'm dodging bullets on the reg.
Dogs are the least of your problems.
I grew up in New York
Dogs.
City.
That was a first week problem. I already knew I was coming into that. I wasn't expecting. I wasn't expecting people to get carjacked and then them to launch the car into someone's house. You know,
Right. Year 3, there was a lady with a flamethrower. It's a rough neighborhood.
House prices are coming down.
Yeah.
And so are the houses.
Or the houses. Oh my god! But yeah, like my series, it's dark fantasy, but it's not grimdark. I put some comedy in there, and like kind of how The Witcher has Dandelion. You got to have somebody in there that lightens it up every so often, or you just get bogged down. At least for myself, that's one reason why I jumped out of Malazan, because it was just Crumpet was the only thing that lifted that up, and then there's a few books that don't have him in it, so you're just like wading through this depressing thing. And
there's more, but Malazan will wring you out like a towel, right? Like there will be long stretches of just grimness and misery, deliberately slow, but it's not. There's a lot of it that's not fun. You like read about this army on the march, and you're like, none of that was fun. There's like 5 pages, and kids are dying, and none of it was fun.
Dude, that's my
Malazan, but that happens.
That's my favorite compliment that when people give me, like, I had so much fun. I'm like, that's all I want. Yeah. I just want you to have fun.
Yeah.
I mean, like, I know I'm not like I'm purposely not writing purple prose, but I'm not saying I could. I'm not like I don't have the Erickson's magic touch, but like. I'm trying to have people just disappear for a few hours,
Right. Just give them the opportunity to duck under the waves, step away from their actual life, and get invested with somebody that they can insert themselves into.
Yeah.
So AR, like, and anybody who's watching this, as you can see, we all have initials in here for our names. And you know why? Because it's awesome. But also AR, like, when did you
time out actual reason? Like, for me, I published with AR Witham because I didn't have to confuse it with anything else on like a Facebook page, and it could be like a different thing, and my family didn't have to hear about my stuff all the time. And 2, it's cooler because like fantasy sci-fi authors having initials as names is like tradition.
Yeah, exactly. I actually
true for you guys.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I put it out as a poll on Twitter before I released my book, and I was just like, "Hey, what sounds the best? J.R. Carroll, Joseph R. Carroll, Joseph Rutt, whatever." And that won by a wide margin. They were like, "Yeah, it sounds, George R.R. Martin type deal."
Yeah. I actually spent weeks agonizing, or I agonized more over what to put my name as on the cover more than any other thing about my books. Like never a plot point or anything. So yeah. I just thought Joe sounded a little, like Joe the plumber, average.
Yeah, Joe. Very average Joe.
Joe Hill pulls it off, but I don't know how. Or Joe Abercrombie. I guess the Abercrombie fancies it up. That's what I always say about it.
Well, yeah, Abercrombie is a great word.
Yeah.
You can insert that anywhere.
It's a Benedict Cumberbatch with a name.
Yeah. Wow. Yes, I think I will. Now, the real question becomes, what does the JCM stand for? Joe.
And someone was like, "Oh, are you going to be like incognito and like maybe gender neutral so people don't know who you are, so they don't make
the J.K. Rowling thing." And
I tried that for like a day, and then like I'm on Twitter and I put my picture there. I'm like, okay, no one's gonna be confused here about my gender identification.
I'm a dude with a beard.
Hey man, with that perfect gray beard coming in, very classy.
Thank you. So yeah, that whole and then every once in a while someone will call me Joe on like one of these nights. I'm like, how did you know? And then I realize it's not a secret. It's fine. I would do terribly in witness protection. Right? They'd have me there for like a week. I'd be like, "Oh, I'm on Facebook. Ooh, hey guys, check out this cool place on that." Check me out. Yeah, all the agents would stop doing that. Anyway.
Yeah, so I think we all, I think, AR, when did you release your book? Was it last year?
It was May 2022.
And then I was 01. Were you 2020? Was that? Yeah. So we're each of the last 3 years for our first book. The question for you guys is, when did you conceive of these stories for your first book?
AR?
Yeah, it was conceived is the right word. It was sometime around the moment of conception. There's actually a few pieces of paragraph left in Blackjack from when I was 14. And I just put it together, and it was one of those things that I worked on it and then I went to bed and worked on it, went to bed. And then my wife found it in my footlocker like 15 years after I had given up working on it. And she said, well,
wow.
She read it and she was like, I want to know what happens to Jack. So
that's awesome.
Finish the damn thing.
That is awesome.
That is. There are elements in my universe, like the magic system, that I've been tinkering with for a long time. I borrow from myself, which is fine because the other stuff wasn't published, so no one knows how derivative.
Yeah.
Using that idea again, no one knows the other idea, so it's fine. But I think I really got the idea really in 2019. And I got the idea, planned it out, wrote it pretty, and then I released it, and it was not good. I really didn't know how to write. And I didn't really promote it much. Like a bunch of my friends and people, friends of friends, read it. I sold like moved a couple hundred copies at most. And then I was like, well, but some people liked it, and people who weren't fantasy sci-fi people liked it enough that I was like, I might really have something here. I should try to make it actually good. I mean something like, like get an editor, like have it proofread, and that's what I thought that meant at the time. And then it's like, my editor was like, you need developmental work here. And I'm like, do I? She's like, yeah, this whole section should be removed. And I'm like, oh yeah, that would be better if I did that. Like even I could tell. So then I did a whole rewrite. And
did you have beta readers?
I did, but and I love my beta readers, and I'm very grateful to them. Very few of them were genre readers. Like they were like friends from high school or whatever. They were people who didn't really. So a lot of the feedback I got wasn't. If you get someone who doesn't read science fiction, they read your science fiction book, they're going to be like, I don't understand what's going on. Like here, and you're not really supposed to. That's normal for. You're supposed to be a little confused in the first chapter, right? Like,
right.
Expect that. But if you don't really read the genre, so I did have beta readers, and I think a lot of them were too nice because they were my friends, and they weren't savage enough because they were people I had been friends with for a long time who were readers, but they were like, "Oh, this is great. Maybe fix a couple things," and it was like that. It didn't end up being what I needed.
Yeah, that's one of the best things that you can do as a writer is go to people who will not be nice to you. Don't go to the people that are nice to you. They're nice, but they're not helping. You need somebody that's going to stick a knife in you and go, "This is wrong," and you go, "Oh, okay," and fix it.
And not every smart person is good at figuring out how to fix a story.
No,
it's a skill set, right? So you'll say someone, "Oh, you should just do this instead," and like they're wrong, or they want to turn it into something it's not supposed to be.
Right?
They mean well. Like
you should make it more like this thing that I like.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. Like that's one of the few things I did right on the first go around was beta readers. I was like, all right, because I watched Jenna Morassi and all these other author tubers and how and I was like, oh, I take things that I think are useful and really I was mostly taking the technical publishing side of things because I kind of knew the story I wanted to tell.
Yeah.
So I was like, well, I got to have as many beta readers as I can get. And I actually went to the Dresden fan Facebook page, messaged one of the moderators, and I was like, hey, I've been on this, on this group forever. I was like, I don't want to like piss anybody off. I didn't want to, but can I ask? And they're like, oh yeah, cool. And I made a nice little post about how Jim Butcher's one of my biggest influences. And, if anybody wants to, and then I did it on Twitter too, when I was really hardcore into Twitter there for a while. And that's how I got most of my beta readers. And I was like, well, my writing style is similar to Jim Butcher, but the setting is more of a Witcher setting, So I was like, I got like 20 people to start off with. And of course, a lot of them will flame out. And I knew this from listening to other authors, but now I have like 3 or 4 hardcore people that I can count on. That's and I think that's been a big thing too. And when you get those people who aren't your friends and are going to tell you stuff, and you're like, you have a part in there. And I always say, like, if I get more than 3 people that tell me, or at least 3 people that tell me something's off, I have to go back and look at it.
Yeah.
And they were telling me one part, and the author and yourself is like, that was a good part. That was a good part, But if you see a pattern forming, it's time to mess with it a little bit or cut it out entirely.
It's so hard to know who to listen to and who to ignore, or what to ignore and what to listen to, right? That's so difficult as a writer. Like, someone will say, this didn't work for me. And sometimes it's like, okay, that needs to be fixed. And sometimes the answer is, you're not the right reader for this.
Yeah.
This is the way the story has to go. I'm sorry it didn't work for you, but this is the story that I'm telling. And pulling the plug on that is very hard. I always feel really bad about it.
Yeah.
Beta comments like, oh, these, like, what, I don't know if you're going to listen to this, but someone was like, you do have too much sarcastic, quippy dialogue. And I'm like, okay.
What?
Yeah.
I'm okay with that.
And I'm like, and I appreciate the sentiment, right? It doesn't work for this guy. But I'm like, you're just not my audience, because that's what I do, right? That's my entire, like, mode of being is sarcastic, quippy dialogue. Like, that's my reason to exist.
Yeah, that's my wheelhouse. That's what I'm trying to do here.
Yeah, I can't not do that. Like, I mean, I appreciate that you don't like it. Like, that's totally reasonable. But I'm sorry, it's dating. I'm not taking on all the stupid jokes.
Yeah, well, and like you said, you have those people who maybe aren't the right genre for your book, and they were like, I'm so confused at the beginning. Well, you're kind of supposed to be. And I had a few people when I first started that were like, well, this doesn't make sense, or why is he doing that? I'm like, because that's a part of the mystery of what's going to happen later. Like, you got to keep going. And how do you guys break down when you give out to your alpha or beta readers? Do you give them like the whole thing at once, or do you chop it up and give them pieces? How do you guys do it?
Joe,
I send a full manuscript, so it's probably my 4th draft, something like that. I usually edit as I go. So if I write a chapter, I'll edit it before I do the next chapter. So I don't know how you count. Sometimes the first chapter I might have rewritten 4 or 5 times by the time I'm on chapter 10, right? But once I have written it and done like a read through, I'll send the whole thing out to beta readers.
Yeah, I don't know that it's. I understand that people do it. I don't know that it's the best idea to send them half a manuscript, because what you're trying to do is tell them a story, and you need an ending in order to tell a story. And expecting them to get halfway and then give you feedback and then give them the rest of it later seems, I'm going to use the word unfair, even though it's wrong. Expecting them to hold on while you take a month intermission is difficult.
Well, yeah, the way I do it is I don't start my beta. Well, it was a little bit different for this last thing I'm working on, because I'm actually working on an anthology. So each short story is 3 chapters. So I would send them the whole 3 chapters.
Right.
The whole short
complete story, a beginning, a middle, and an end.
Yeah. But like when I do a full length novel, I normally give out like 6 chapters at a time, but I give it while I'm done. It's already done, but I just give it so I can get feedback, from those chapters, bank it, and then give them the next 6, and I can work on the 6 previous chapters. And
so there's no gap in the middle.
There's no gap. Yeah, there's no. As soon as they're done, bam, you get the next section.
That works.
Yeah.
Talk to you later, Tony.
Easy. Yeah.
But so how long from the time you started writing, how long did it take you guys to finish like your first drafts of your book?
Joe,
The time I started writing, period?
Well, from the time you started writing that story.
21 years. Oh. That story. I think I wrote Wistful Asending, and I think I wrote the version that I published, which is not good. I think in like 3 or 4 months.
That's not bad.
I remember I was trying to hit 2,000. It's a 120,000 word book. I was trying to hit 2,000 words a day, and I didn't. but I didn't fall that short. So it should have been 60 days, and it wasn't. It was like 75 or 80 days, or maybe 90 days.
That's still good, man. That's still really good for the size book it is.
But I'm more of a planner, so like when I'm starting to write, I pretty much know what I'm doing already, and so I don't know how long I was planning for. Like this last book, I wrote my last Hybrid Helix book in 51 days, which is insane. It's insane.
Nice.
But I had a really thorough idea of what I was doing before I started. Like I'd been thinking about it for like 9 months. So, it's not quite. I'm not writing
How long a gap did you take in between writing? Like when you finished your first book, when did you start your second?
I don't remember. Jeez, that was like 2-3 years ago, man.
Right.
Yeah, that's I don't have that kind. I drink a lot, so I don't know. I think it was a few months. I think I released the first one, and I tried to get feedback and get a sense of what people liked and didn't like. And then I wrote the second one, the rough draft, and then I realized I really didn't know what I was doing. And then I started like taking courses and reading books about craft and watching Brandon Sanderson's videos, like his lecture series, which I recommend to people all the time. If you want to write science fiction fantasy, you should absolutely watch his Brandon Sanderson's lectures at Brigham Young. It's an actual course on how to write science fiction fantasy, and he just records it and puts it on YouTube for free. Like that's gold. And people pay good money for that, for good reason. So I watched that, and then I joined a couple of writing discords where we were critiquing each other's works, like chapter at a time, and critiquing other people, and then seeing it was actually a really smart system. It was a server called Incubators with an INK, which is a totally awesome name. I don't know if it's still there. Everyone make a Google Doc, and we'd all comment on it. So comments were open. So not only would you see like everything that you were making comments, like this word should be deleted, this is extraneous, this line doesn't quite work. Other people would either say like +1, like I agree, and you'd be like, okay, my instincts were on point. Or they might say, disagree, this actually means something slightly different and it works for me. And you learn so much. And it was asynchronous, right? Because you have people from all over the world. You didn't have to be there on the same time. It's all comments on a Google Doc. That was an amazing system for learning how to write. And critiquing other people's work is incredibly valuable. Like you read a story or a line or a paragraph, this doesn't work, right? It's terrible. Why? What is wrong with it? What needs to be changed to fix it? That's such a valuable thing to try to piece together, because then you apply that same lens to your own stuff.
Well, yeah, and this is what I've always tell people, like teaching, and I had my cover artist on yesterday, and he's now been teaching people, art, and we had a discussion about how teaching makes you better because you are thinking about the fundamentals and you strengthen your own fundamentals while teaching.
Absolutely.
So how about you, AR? How long did it take you once you really got into it to finish it?
Well, there's no real telling. It's in that footlocker, then it comes out of the footlocker, then it goes back into the footlocker.
It's wibbly wobbly, timely wimey. Yeah.
Wibbly wobbly, timely wimey. I'll tell you what I've learned is that right now I'm putting together a trilogy, all 3 books at the same time. I've learned a lot by doing that. I'm glad I waited and didn't release book 1 until book 3 was done, and that those are all bubbling at the same time, because it really helps from a storytelling and art perspective and being able to weave things back in. But I can get from 0 to 90,000 words in maybe 3 months at this point. Like not like you could publish 4 books a year. Right, because there's all that other stuff that goes into it, and but being able to get like Joe says, a 4th draft ready so that another human being can read it and give you feedback is about a 3-month process.
So are you doing
the whole, this writer does it this way and this writer does it this way. There's no one right way, so don't feel like any of these are wagon paths you need to follow.
There are wrong ways, but there's no one right.
There are wrong ways.
So are you writing a whole different trilogy outside of Legend of Blackjack then?
Yeah. Blackjack is a standalone. I'm developing 1, 2, and 3 right now as a triptych.
Nice. Once, are you going to do like one a month, or?
I think I'm probably going to go one every other month, and it'll be 2024 at some point, and then we'll go bang dip, bang, and see how that goes. But yeah, it's a lot of fun. It's nice working on those muscles, like Joe says. It's like, are you doing this every day?
Yeah.
And that's really the key, I think, for whatever system you use is consistency. And, if I go a day without, poop out 500 words, man, sometimes you have a bad day. But
that's why I tell people, I was like, if you write 300 words every day, all year, you have a full-length novel.
You got a book.
And, so because if you're on Twitter and you're in the writing community, it can be very demoralizing whether or not they're telling the truth or not. So we'll just take it at face value that people are telling the truth.
Or their version of the truth.
Just did 10,000 words today, and I'm like,
I've hit 5. I may have hit 6, but I've certainly never broken that. I don't think those are very good. But I can't do that. I can't write like 1,000 words a day and chunk it out. I need to spend a lot of time thinking about it and then sit down and write in a frenzy.
Right.
Yeah. The way I do it is like I tell people, it's like I always tell people, I can't write a lot in one day, but I can write every day. So like with my first book, and it was the first time I had written in years, because the genesis of the first story, if you read the first short story that I wrote 20 years ago, it's nothing like it. But I took like things from it, and I was like, you know what? I want to start really taking writing, because I was at a point in my life, and don't want to bring the stream down or anything, but I was like, you feel like at some points you feel like, especially as a man, you feel like all I'm doing is I'm running on a treadmill and I'm just an ATM. I'm just working to pay stuff. And I was like, I want to do something for me, something that I love to do. And I was like, you know what? I'm gonna start writing again. So I did a bunch of like watching YouTube and all that, figuring out stuff. And then I wrote every single day, not a whole bunch every day sometimes, but I at least got something out every day for 114 days. I remember it because it was like a big deal to me. I was like 114 days straight of writing, finished the first book,
That is a big deal.
And then the second book, it took me 79 days, and I wrote 1,000 words every single day for 79 days. Because my books are on the shorter end. Wow. But I tell people, it's like the things that's going to make you a better writer is writing as much as you can. That's going to help you, and then reading other books, and then having beta readers tell you when your stuff's not right. Those 3 things are going to make you a better writer over time. Is just keep kind of molding you.
100%. Absolutely.
So, how was your publishing experience? Like, when you first started, were you like, did you like kind of know what you were doing, or were you like,
Andy?
Do any of us know what we're doing?
Does anybody still know what they're doing?
You get people who know better, right? You definitely have people we see in the indie publishing community who come out and they have a Felix Ortiz cover, and they have bookmarks, and they have arcs going to the bloggers. And Tiago Abdallah knew what he was doing when he came out with A Touch of Light, right? He was on Mark Lawrence's Discord, and he really had a strategy for getting this into people's hands and people were aware of that book. It was also a great book, which I'm not.
That helps.
I'm like reading it very slowly. It's a great book, but there are a lot of great books that no one has ever read, right? That
Absolutely.
no one has seen. And I'm not saying that Touch of Light. I'm saying that just in general, we know that quality is not sufficient as a marketing strategy. It's a really good book, so everyone will read it. That's not enough.
Yeah, and if you're already doing well before you're an author and you have disposable income, you can make it work for yourself, through ad revenue. And
there are people who like look at me and they you can tell a successful. I keep saying this. You can kind of tell if someone's selling books by look at how many Amazon ratings they have. if they have a lot, they're selling a bunch of books. Maybe not a strict mathematical formula, but if they have like none or very few, they're selling fewer books. You can know people's sales. And someone's like, oh yeah, and I'm like, you know, some the easiest way to sell a lot of books is to have a lot of money, so you don't need to sell a lot of books. Because you can spend money on stuff like, you know, you can get great covers without spending a lot, but it's a lot easier if you can spend a lot.
Yep.
How'd you guys?
I got in touch with Ryan Cahill before I launched, and he was nice enough to kind of walk me through it before he started doing, like, where you'd go on and do videos and say, look, kids, this is what you do. And Dave Gogren was a great influence, but there's all kinds of information that's out there, and the more that you take advantage of it, the better off you'll be. Because none of us will tell you that you can just launch your book and they will find you.
They will find you.
Because they won't. I guarantee that every single one of us has worked and hustled for every third review we've gotten, right? I mean, we're sending it out to book bloggers. We're sending it out to the community. We're waving our hands and saying hi. We're doing giveaways. I mean, all of that is built into it. And if you know, doing that is critical for you to feel like you're getting anybody's attention, because you don't go from 0 to 100 by yourself.
But if you're broke, you know, you have to just be realistic with your expectations, right? Like one very useful thing I did was if someone asked me for a review copy, I send it, right? Like I don't even argue. I don't check their numbers. I don't. Nope. You know, if you have I have a YouTube channel, can I get a review copy? The answer is yes.
100%. 100%.
Well, that's money, and I can afford to just do this, you know. But not everyone can. There are people who are like that. Because what does it cost to send an author copy on Amazon? For me, it's like $10 if they're in the UK.
Right.
Something about 10 once you print it and ship it.
And then another $6 for shipping, and you're all set, ready to go. Was it worth $15 to send it to them?
Sometimes, I like to send a signed copy if I can, but sometimes, you know, especially if it's just out of the blue, sometimes it's cheaper to just send it to them through Amazon.
Yeah. I send them an author copy from Amazon to their address. So the other funny part about it, I know what all their book reviewers, I know what all their porches look like.
Yeah.
Photo.
It sounds creepier than I really mean it to be, but it's just kind of funny. You delivered your package. I'm like, that's not my house. Like, oh wait,
everything you say is creepier than you mean it to be.
It's so crazy because, like, I don't know, something weird happened with Amazon when I first and I'll be fair, I was not prepared, you know, but I didn't want to wait so long, so I released it. And I got like 20 reviews or so, but then they just started vanishing. Like, and I'm like, okay, so now I'm fighting it again. But like when I started interacting online here on YouTube and doing interviews with, like, you know, Philip Chase or whatever, is like, oh, it's like, can I send you a copy? And I don't know if it's like, if my face just says, I'm a guy, trust me where you live, you know? So like, everybody was just like, sure, here's my home address, you know? And I'm like, I'm glad I look trustworthy.
Joseph, this is an important thing to address, because Joe and I both grew up in an era where every year they would bring this gigantic book to your house. I had everyone's name, address, and telephone number in it. There is no fear for us about people knowing where we live. It's like, who cares? Are they going to come and get me? I don't think so.
I do remember.
I can still remember when getting a call at your house phone was like, somebody's calling. Yeah. Now if I get a call on my cell phone, I'm like, why the hell are you calling me? You know, like,
I had one booktuber had to send me a copy of his driver's license to get the book from customs. And I'm like, I hate to ask. He's like, oh no, this is what happens. It's fine. He sent me a scan of his driver. Like, I felt strange, even though it was like totally normal. I was like, this is weird. I mean, obviously I'm not going to do anything with it, you know, but it seemed strange. This is an invasion of your privacy, but I don't have a choice. So, you need something to customs. I don't know.
You know my weight, my height,
my
likes, my dislikes, whether I'm an organ donor.
It's like, dude, I've seen your videos. That's a lie, right? No,
right.
That's not your weight.
Oh my God. Are you kidding me? 160? I don't think so.
Well,
Kilogram?
slim 160.
Stone.
Oh my god. So how do you guys come up with your ideas? Like, do you I know people have all different kinds of ways that they start their books or start it in their, like, where do you guys start from?
Andy?
Right there. And then right
Putting a little light.
there, and some of those, and some of these, and some of those. People that ask you where do your ideas come from don't have ideas. I don't understand. They don't know where their ideas come from because they're in the air, right? You watch a television show, you see a movie, you read a book, you write an article, and they just come to you, right? The muse shows up and knocks you in the head. Now, whether you do something with it or whether it's a good idea are entirely different stories.
Good ideas, right? We're asking the wrong question.
I've had so many bad ideas.
Where do good ideas come from?
Right? Where do good ideas come from?
It's like, it's not where do your ideas come from. It's how do you filter the good ones from the bad ones?
Yeah. How do you decide, people would like to hear about this one?
Right.
I just try to shoehorn them all in.
Right.
That's my general philosophy or approach. But
Get a funnel.
I find that, yes, theft is a good place to get ideas from. What I find hilarious, I think it's people. Well, first of all, I'm an older person, right? So I've read a lot of stuff that other people haven't read because they weren't reading 30 years ago because they weren't born yet, right? So that's one thing. And then I think I've read a lot of like comics and like I have exposure to things that not everyone in the fantasy and science fiction community does. It's like I stole this from a Bollywood movie. You don't watch Bollywood movies, so do you. You're like, Joe, you're so original. I'm like, no, I'm not. This is like totally treadworn, tropey idea that's been done 1,000 times, but it's not been 1,000 times in the stuff you watch. So it's like, you're brilliant. I'm like, I'm not brilliant. Like I totally.
The best thing I love to do is look up obscure mythology. That's where I like to do it.
Give me some Gilgamesh. What's Gilgamesh doing?
I just have a handful of original characters. Like the main characters are original, right? And then I just filter around obscure mythology within it. And I love my beta readers to be like, is that a real god? After they get done with a section, they'll be like, is that a real thing? I'm like, you'll have to look it up.
Like Wikipedia and look up like old like mysticism and occult stuff from like the 1800s, like theosophy, and there's just like tons of stuff that these people were throwing around. Like I can use that. No one's going to get offended. Like, nobody cares about theosophy anymore, really, or very few people.
Well, and I love Native American culture, so there's not a lot of Native American stuff in fantasy books. So I was just like, you know what? I'm going to find some of the coolest stuff within Native American culture, and I'm going to bring it. And then, like what I did with my second book, I was like, why are tall tales not told in a more adult fashion in fantasy? Like I have rarely seen it. Even when they do like Western fantasy, they don't hardly ever bring in, the tall tale characters. So that was my second book. I'm like, I'm gonna find them all. Like I'm gonna get them in there, and I'm gonna make it a more adult version. Not adult content, but
I feel like any one of us. Okay, you could give us King Lear, all right, and all three of us could go off and base a story on King Lear. Right. And there would be three entirely different stories that had entirely different characters, that had different outcomes, different emotional hits. Everything would be different. So, all that stuff that comes to you in the air, you suck through the straw, it all gets processed through you. And that's your job as an artist or just as a person, is really to take that and make it your own thing. And if you decide you've got something good enough that you want to share with people, rock thee onward.
Yeah. And I'll say something unpopular. I feel people say like, I don't ever get any ideas. Like, where do you get good ideas from? Like, I never get any ideas. And I'm like, don't write.
Might not be your thing.
Or watch some movies. You could be a good person without writing books, right? Like that's not like a requirement.
Right.
You don't have ideas. You don't have ideas bursting at the seams to get on paper that you're like desperate to create a story out of it. Don't. it's okay, you know. Maybe you have other creative outlets. Maybe you can make furniture. Well, I don't know what the hell you want to do.
Dude, and you know what's funny? It's like, you know, and again, like we're not here trying to be like, don't write or we're the best or whatever.
Yeah.
But like, I have more ideas than I can write. That's you know, the way I tell people when people ask me, they're like, well, how do you come up with a story? How do you come up with a book idea? And I was like, it all starts from the main character for me. Like, I think about a character. Okay, what type of character is this? Okay, they're a vampire. They're a warrior. Okay, what time do I want to set it in? And then from there, I'm like, okay, I can, you know, what would they be going up against? What kind of stuff would that person or that character not like? You know, and then it's weird. From there, I jump all the way to the ending. Like, I see the beginning, I see the character, and then I see how it ends, and then I just put bullet points all the way through. And I was like, all right, they need to get to here. They need to meet this person. They need to fight that one. You know, I'm not a huge plotter. Like Brandon Sanderson has 250 pages of plot outlines. I'm not like that. You know, I'm just more of a like, give me like 12 bullet points for my character to, you know, go through. Oh, Derek's here.
And
so how do you guys structure your stories?
What?
Structure.
Something in the hopper. Joe, you always plan. You do fantastic outlines.
Joe's like 250 plot. I do 400 minimum.
Yeah.
That's a slow Tuesday.
I don't put a ton on paper, but I have a lot, right? Like I know what has to happen. And then the trick is you've got disparate elements. Like, you know, you'll have like 2 or 3 things going on, and they have to interact, right? So like your plot A has to affect your B plot, has to affect your C plot. Your characters have to develop across all 3 in meaningful ways, and then the timelines have to work, so the people aren't in 2 places at the same time. And I end up just using a Google Doc. Lots of like, okay, it's day 4 at 8 a.m. Where is everybody? You know, I have lots of lines like that on a sheet, and then and then I hope for the best.
And I'm still very much a screenplay guy because that was my job for 8 years. And so a screenplay, you have 120 pages, right? So you have a defined 30-minute Act 1, 30-minute beginning of Act 2. 30-minute second half of Act 2, and a 30-minute conclusion. So it's all broken down into that 4-act structure where you've got a midpoint pivot in the middle. And then once you've got that, you can. It's pretty easy to figure out what your pinnacle and zenith and apogee of each section is going to be. And your third act is better than the first half of your second act. Good. By the end of the second act, the worst thing should have happened.
But it's hard with a series, right? Because people are like, "Oh, we like these things, and we don't like these things." You got to like find. I got to find a way to put bears in every freaking book.
Oh, don't do it, man! Don't get the bears, the Ursins.
And I like the bears, but I'm like, but part of me is like, I don't really have anything for them. Okay, I'll figure out something for them to do.
We'll do an Ursin guest star spot.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, because so. Or
well, and another thing I've seen, and I can do 2 examples. Now these are traditional published people, and maybe because they were trying to get traditionally published, that this is the reason they did it this way. But with Sandman Slim and Monster Hunters International, they both like blew it out in the first book. Like they went epic world-ending things right out of the gate. Did you guys have any of that thought in your mind where I was like, I got to come out hard in this first book, to really show people?
I mean, I'm a little bit different in that the first one is just meant to be a complete standalone.
Yeah.
So that's completely emotionally satisfying, and you can walk away and never think about it again. So to me, you're always trying to bring it as hard as you can, because that's the one thing that terrifies me, is that my reader is going to get bored right? And they're going to start drifting off and go. So I want to make absolutely sure I got a screenplay. I got 120 minutes. You're going to sit your ass down in the theater and you're going to watch this thing. So I'm going to bring you the A #1 plus prime, and which is why I cut tons, right? If it feels slow, if it feels boggy, if it feels confusing, it goes, right? And you just keep on trimming it down until you've got something that's sweet and nice and easy to follow.
And a gut punch at the end, so they call their friend and say, "You should read this book."
Yeah, you should read this because I just came out of this roller coaster ride and I had a blast.
Because that's what you really need, right? That's where you get the word of mouth from.
So
Legend of Blackjack absolutely does, right? You do that gut punch at the end; it's perfect.
Right.
So that's a good question. Are you guys? So I take it, AR, that you are an overwriter.
I have no idea if anyone else in the world uses my process, but to me, it's when I was a kid, whenever we would struggle with writer's block or not knowing what to draw, Mom would take the piece of paper and she'd take a pencil and she'd go and rip it across the paper and go, there, it's ruined. You can't do any worse than this. Now write whatever you want, draw whatever you want.
A savage.
And this is why I never get stuck. I never get writer. Well, partially because it was a job and I learned how to do it, whether I felt like doing it or not. But to me, I love, once I've got the outline in place and I know where each chapter has to end. And then, so I just write a really bad version of that chapter. And then I go back and make a better version. It's like 1,300 words. And then it's like 1,700 words that my mom could read and tell me they were terrible. And then it's like 2,300 words that a normal person could read and tell me, like, I kind of got it. And then it's like, okay, I got my 3,000, moving on to the next one. So to me, I'm very iterative.
How go you, Joe?
I've gravitated towards the opposite end of the spectrum. So usually I'll plan for a long time, really think about it, and then I'll sit there. And if I write a chapter that's not quite right, I'll rework it on the spot until it's really close to what I want at the end. Because I feel like if I don't have chapter 1 really hitting the tonal points I want, chapter 2 is going to be off. I mean, I really have to get a feel for the character voice, what jokes I'm going to use, what the tone is, really spot on. And then by the time this last book, I finished it, I guarantee it was 95% final when I gave it to my beta readers. My beta readers come back and they're like, I don't understand what's going on in the scene, but like it required like one scene I had to rewrite 3 paragraphs because of beta reader feedback, and that's all I ever have. That's all I have to do for the last 2 books, for Blood Reunion and Shadow of Hyperion. So it's agony. It's like agonizing to get there, but when I get there, it's very close to finished. And I can't write like a crappy. I'll get stuck before I'll write stuff that I'm not going to keep. This is how my brain works.
I am the same way. See the way I work, like, because I write. 95% of everything I've ever written has been basically at work. You know, I don't write at the house. I don't really have time to sit down and just write. So I'll, take my phone, Google Docs, and in between working, like if I do a little walking relay, that's 15 minutes of me thinking, okay, all right, this is what I want to write. I get back to the vehicle, so I've almost pre-edited it before I've written it every time. So I almost that's why when I do, I'm actually more of an underwriter. So when I give it to my beta readers, they'll be like, well, you should add more sensory stuff. That's the thing I normally get is sensory things. So in this short story thing, I was like, all right, you want sensory stuff, people,
The smells, the tastes, the flavors, the sound, the music, other stuff.
Sometimes I think
the sensation, the touch.
Sometimes I think writers are mostly doing the same thing, except some people are like everyone starts with a blank page, right? And like a blank, no idea, and then they get a first idea, and then in some order, right? So some people will like do their rough draft as their outline. Like they'll draft it, right? And then some people, their outline will be in their head, and some people, their outline will be on paper as an outline. And they'll say, oh, I'm a planter, I'm a plotter, I'm a what, but you're all kind of doing the same thing, right? And then we're going back to it and going through it again and again. So, you know, my first 3 versions might be in my head, but it's not that different.
Yeah.
You know.
I try to tell people, it's like, they're like, well, what's the difference between a writer and an author? And I was like, well, the difference between a writer and an author is an author is somebody who says, yeah, I have 27 ideas in my head, but I'm going to write this one. And I'm going to stay with it, you know, because I have those things too. Like I have my first like 8 books, like that I want to write planned in my mind, but it's like, I can't let the next book, you know, supersede what I'm trying to do now. Like, yeah, that's a really cool idea. I can't wait to write it. Finish this thing. You know,
don't go chasing waterfalls.
You gotta stick to the lakes and streams that you're used to, right?
And that's the thing, is that one of the requirements of finishing a novel is not being a crow who's distracted by every shiny object that comes along, including the ones that you create in order to get yourself to stop writing what you're writing and write at something else. Don't do it. I mean, unless you wind up with a complete train wreck, you have to stick with the girl what brung you.
Well, and that's the thing. I tell people, it's like, yeah, man, it's hard to not like jump on to the next thing when you have great ideas. But it's like, do you want to write a book or do you just want to write? You know?
Well, and I will say that one of the things that one of the first producers I ever worked with told me, which was, an idea is useless. It by itself, it has no value whatsoever. If someone is willing to place the love and the time and the effort and the kisses and the struggles and the sweat and the tears to make that idea into something that is a viable product, that will get you there. But a great idea, there are millions of great ideas laying around, yep, you know, all over the world that will never become anything because the person who has that idea is never going to finish anything with it.
Yeah, that's why there's a guy whose name I'm blanking on, did a podcast with Merle Lafferty. Matt Wallace is a writer, and he used to say people would come up to him with like, I have this great idea, like, first, if you write it, we can split the profits. Like every writer hears it, it's like they just laugh because they're like, no, like your idea is not worth half of anything.
Half of anything, right? Because the idea is 1% of it.
Yeah,
it's 1% of it. That's how good your greatest idea is.
Yeah.
Die Hard meets Speed on a train. 1%.
It's Under Siege, Dark Territory.
There we go. That was the pitch, actually.
Oh my gosh!
But the grind is what makes it real.
Well, yeah, it's like, you know, it's so funny. Like people, when you first publish a book, you know, a lot of people are impressed. They're like, "Wow, you actually did it. You did the thing." And then when you do the second book, they're kind of like, second one? Like, are you trying to do something here? Like, oh, am I trying to do something? You know, like,
you're noticing now.
You noticed.
120,000 words later, you're noticing now.
Yeah, people like family members or like friends who are not genre people, and they're always like, it's always like, yeah, I wrote some books. It's about a superhero who punches spaceships. And I'm like, it's not literary. You're not going to be impressed. Just
you're not prepared to not be impressed.
Move on. I'm not the next John Updike, right? Keep walking.
Dude, this is Joe's pitch slogan.
That is the one thing I am so like that's the one thing I have going for me is like all my friends are a bunch of nerds. Like, and my wife is a nerd. Her mom's a nerd. So she's read my books, and it's so funny. She'll finish a book, and she'll be like, "Why did you do that to that person?" Like,
I got the cover for Shadow of Hyperion. I got the cover art, and I'm like, "Honey, you got to see this. It's like a Chris McGrath painting. It's epic." And she's like, "That's nice, dear." And she pats me on the head. doesn't care at all, means nothing to her.
Don't quit your day job.
Oh.
honey.
No chance of happening.
My wife, at first, she was like, I tried to keep the writing while I was at work, while I was away, not messing with home time.
Yeah.
And she would get a little annoyed if I was like, I got this idea, I got to get it down. And she's like, I got to go off into this other, because I like to walk around while I write too, if I'm at the house. So she's like, getting mad at me. But then like, once you get it out there, she sees that you're serious and some cells start to come in, they're like, oh, this is a thing. People actually do want to read your stuff.
Actually write like on a phone?
Yeah, I write in Google Docs.
But like on the phone keyboard?
On the phone, yeah.
Wow. I could not do that. I don't even think I can write a book without a mechanical keyboard. Oh, geez.
Woo. Well, I am glad that you are here with us.
Yeah.
Right. John A. Douglas, on your final hours of your 16-hour shift, I would like to say on behalf of all of us, I don't know if anything is making sense to you at all anymore.
John, I have been there. I've been there in my first year and a half with the post office. It was an hour drive there, hour drive back, and 13 hours on the shift, man. I know how you do it.
Yeah. Derek Bees, what was the funniest reaction you guys when you told friends or family you wrote a book?
What was all right? Yeah, I want to hear you guys.
I finished Blackjack and I told my dad, I was like, hey, I wrote a character that's basically about you. And he read it and he was like, it's all right. It's all right.
What about you, Joe? When
we should have gotten a funny reaction. I got a lot of blank stares because that's a science fiction book about a guy who flies through, and they're just like, what?
They pay you for that?
Yeah. Oh, so it's like a comic book. Like, sure. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I never got a really good one.
Yeah, when I told people like outside of my like really close knit, like the next level out, it was like, oh, you wrote a book? Well, that's so cool. What's it about? And I'm like, it's about a vampire that kills other vampires and stuff. Like they're like, you're one of those vampire people? Like, I'm not a vampire person. I just think they're cool. Yeah. Like,
yeah. Is it like Twilight?
No. Yeah. They're like, oh, is it like that Twilight movie? I'm like, nothing like it. Not even close.
Not even a little.
And it's so funny. Like if you talk to like people who are a lot older, and you're trying to figure out what to tell them it's like. It's like,
yeah.
Witcher? No, no Witcher.
Bells. Yeah.
The only thing I can come to with a lot of the older people that know me is like Lord of the Rings, kind of, not really, but
like with the blade built in with Wesley.
Yeah. They're like, I've heard of Lord of the Rings. Oh, you've heard of Lord of the Rings? Okay,
you're never gonna read this.
I should say you're not going to read it, so what difference does it make?
Mm-hmm.
It's fine.
It's a self-help book on how to build a fortune with gravel.
I mean, people mean well, and I'm not trying to be like, I don't want to seem ungracious. They're showing interest in my hobby, which is nice.
Yeah. I'm always like cool with it. I'm trying to find something that they like, and I'm like, okay, it's like this, but with this.
All my friends with hobbies, they make sourdough bread. And I'm like, that's so much easier because we've all eaten sourdough bread and lots of us like sourdough bread. It's like, oh, bread. You can make sandwiches with bread. I get it. And I'm like, all right, books about superheroes. Like, why?
Because they're awesome.
Because they're awesome.
And they're talking spaceships. So back off, people who like bears.
Yeah.
Bears beats Battlestar Galactica.
Oh.
That's what you need, Joe. More beats. You can round out the trifecta.
I will work on that.
Hyper intelligent beats.
$5 on Amazon. That's
about $5 if you really want to. That's
About 400 pages.
that is the best. That's the best. Yes. It's about $2.99.
Yeah.
$3.99.
I will let people pull my book up on their phone, like, oh, open Amazon, I'll show you.
Yeah.
I make them type it in and find the book, and I'm like, that's mine. And then they're like, that's usually makes people, it gets a reaction, just like, oh.
Right.
Yeah,
you have a product on Amazon.
Yeah, do you guys get the holy moly, you actually do have something out there? Like, that's what I get all the time.
Yeah. Because people usually think I'm kidding, because I do joke around on occasion. And I'm like, no, really, there's a book there. You know, and, like that's me. Yeah.
So how did you guys come up with your covers?
Joe's got a better story.
I don't know if it's a better story. So I literally was sitting there. I was literally sitting at my. Well, so okay. So if you look on my, no one needs to do this, but if you ever happen to look at my Goodreads page, that's the original cover. I got that relatively cheap from one of these graphic design mills. It was fine, but I thought it wasn't really enough. So I'm sitting at my desk and I'm looking around. I'm like, who makes good covers? I have no idea. I'm not really an art guy. I'm like, okay, Harry Dresden. These are cool. I like these covers. And
why not just get Dresden's already?
Who did the cover for whatever the hell book it was? I don't remember. Chris McGrath. And I literally Googled it, and I did zero research. First name I thought of. And I emailed the guy, and I'm like, Chris, and he's a lovely guy, Chris. And I'm like, will you do a cover for me? And he's like, sure. I'm like, what? Sure. I never in a million years thought.
Like, if you got the money, I'll do it.
That was exactly the response. I'm like, how much? He told me how much, and I was like, I have that much, which I should not have spent that much on a cover, because my chances of making that back are just like it's very remote. It's very hard to do, and I locked myself into using him I love the covers, but they're expensive. And I locked myself in. So now I'm on 4, and I'm like, okay.
Do I get a group discount?
I love him. And Chris is a wonderful guy, and I love the covers, but I'm also like,
I got a punch card. It says my 5th cover is free.
He's not nickel and dime. I mean, he's expensive. Like, he'll literally say, oh, it's going to take me a couple extra weeks. I'm doing some work for them, the special release of like the new Dune. I'm like, you do that.
Yeah.
Oh, that means more.
I guess I'll take a backseat to Dune.
Look at his Instagram. It's like, oh yeah, more interior art for the fancy release. I'm like, yeah, you should be doing that. You should not be working on my cover, man. Like that's more important. So
those covers let him do your covers.
Yep, exactly.
Charge Universal $25,000 per piece. Joe gets the discount. We pass the savings on to you.
Yeah.
So AR, how'd you come about yours?
Oh, right. So mine is meant to be good for 2 entirely separate audiences, which is young people and adults. So I didn't want it to feel too high fantasy, and I didn't want it to feel too YA. So I decided iconography was best. So it was just like, what sums Jack up better than anything? It's a scalpel. So the whole thing is, and what I wanted was for the cover of the book to feel like a grimoire, where there's a lock on the cover and you have to turn it. It's got gilded edges that are kind of protected. And then there's this ring in the center that gives you, what the book's about. And it's this kind of scalpel with magic around it. And a buddy of mine who works in animation for DreamWorks actually put it together for me. As a gift. So that was the sweetest ever, which gave me more money to spend on the covers of the ones I'm doing now.
And you did your own audio book. Did you cheaped out that way?
I also cheaped out with. I'm Scottish. I will save money no matter how I can.
Well, we all know AR came in with his smooth voice to do his own audiobook.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I'm coming to you from a used car emporium. I did the audiobook in a used car radio booth.
Yeah, that's a great story,
dude. I know. I remember you telling me that when we were on the Steve's channel, and I was like, that is awesome. Like,
that's a wine cellar, that glass door. We don't really drink that much wine, or we do, but we don't collect wine where we need a cellar for it. We'll just buy wine and drink it. So I'm like, part of me is like, how do I convince my wife to let me turn that into a sound studio?
Yeah.
Well, inside the house, right? Like it's not. There's no windows. There's no external.
I've got a perfect way. You tell her I'm coming to record in your wine cellar. I'll bring all the stuff, and then you can keep it. And you and I get to drink wine for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
I had thought about it. Like people have said, like Joe, like because I do stupid. Like if you've ever watched my YouTube shorts, I do stupid voices and whatever. But like I just it's just time. Like I do too much stuff, So it's like I work 10 hours a day. I write when I'm at work. I come home. I do football practice. I'm like,
That's the part people I think fail to understand. Like, oh, why don't you have bookmarks? I'm like, I'm sure I could figure out a way to get bookmarks done. I could do the research. I could find the website. I could, but like, but then I'd have to not do something else.
Right.
One of these, one of those.
There you go.
Bookmarks are fantastic. Nothing against, like, bookmarks are a great thing to have. I'm just like, it's just one of many things that I should have that I don't.
Right. I've spent no less than the last 4 months thinking I should do bookmarks and not doing bookmarks because I'm doing other stuff.
Right. Writing a trilogy.
Right.
Yeah. So, okay.
Like writing takes up enough space that's like, especially if you guys are actually just waiting till you get home and writing physically and just sitting there. That's like,
I think you're assuming that Joe and I ever leave the house.
You're like, do we get outside or not?
I work from home. I can write for 2 hours before my boss even notices.
Oh, you lucky dog.
6:30, and then if I could write from 7 to 9, like I'm not technically supposed to be at work yet. So I just log, then I turn to the other computer.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and that's another thing I tell people. I'm like, I'm not trying to demean or pull down anything that Brandon Sanderson does because he's amazing. He's the man. Bow down to Sanderson. But like people are like, oh man, he wrote 3 books this year. And I'm just like, he writes for 8 hours every day. Like I've heard his schedule. Like he legitimately has 8 hours of writing time. Like if I can do 1,000 words a day with, 10 hours of work and 2 hours of drive time, if I had 8 hours to do nothing but write, I could probably bust out, 4,000 or 5,000 words a day if I wanted to.
And one of the big things for him was COVID shutting down all the in-person meet and greet affairs, book signing.
So then he had all the time in the world,
And I think there's a great thing to be taken from that because, in order to produce, you have to spend time on that. Yeah. So, if Brandon Sanderson can churn out an extra 3 books because he's not going to events, you can finish a book by not watching 2 television shows a night.
That's exactly my thing. And you know what's funny? Like I try to I want to help people and I want to encourage people, but then again, you don't want to come across as like you're lazy people. But it's like, okay, do you want to write or do you want to get better at something? Do you want to learn a trade or do you want to watch the Kardashians for 2 hours?
Right.
Every day. It's like,
choose wisely.
What do we want to do? Like, and this is what I tell people: if you have a passion, whatever it is, whether it's writing, whether it's crafting, you have to sacrifice something. Something gets sacrificed so you can do the thing that you want to do. Yeah. There's only 24 hours in the day, and you have to sleep at least 5 hours a day, or you'll go crazy like me. Yeah.
Yeah.
Last time I slept for 5 hours a day was college, so I like 8.
I'm a 7 guy. Like if I get more than 7, then I'm like.
I'm at 7.
And Joe's like 7. I nap throughout the entire day.
Right. I actually do. I am a napper.
He's a lion.
I am a napper.
He's out on the savannah napping.
So how far out are you guys planning with your writing or your? Because I know you said you have a trilogy, right, AR?
Yeah. The trilogy will come out at the first half of 2024, depending on how things go. you know, because it's got to be good before it can see light of day. But then after that, I've got some ideas, but I'm not thinking about any of them until this is over the finish line. I probably what I'll do is some kind of Steam release valve, like what Joe's doing now, where it's just like, okay, let's do a progression fantasy, or let's write something in the first person, or whatever. Just do something to blow off some steam.
I know, Joe, we've talked on many occasions, and you're like, 25 books, maybe?
25 books. 25 books. But
28.
In like last fall, I got bounced out of Spiffbo in the first round, and I was like, damn it, I can write a fantasy. I'm going to show them I can write a fantasy. So I wrote a fantasy, and it was a much more straightforward, like structurally book to write. Just happened to be. I'm not saying all fantasies are straightforward. And I felt like it was like a nice like break to do something simple and straightforward, and then come back to my main series. So now I got another idea, and I think I'm going to do it again. But that was a standalone, and this is going to be a not standalone. So now I don't know what I'm going to do, because I got this whole idea for a cultivation story.
Yeah.
So I can get all the cradle people.
His pitch line literally is, "It's like Cradle."
Like Cradle.
You know what, man? That is not a bad way to go, because on my YouTube channel, like every time I did a Cradle review, it's like hundreds of views immediately.
Okay. They are. It's people who are ridden by tiny dragons into battle.
Yes.
So they're not dragon riders; they're dragon ridden, and they are.
Are they like paratroopers? They get dropped by the.
They are cultivating Vikings who fly airships on raids with tiny dragons on their backs, and it's a cultivation story.
Your dragon gets bigger as you go.
Yeah.
How can you beat that?
Well, you can you develop magical powers with the dragons, and that you reach different stages where the dragons upgrade and you upgrade, and the whole thing. The blackjack and hookers, no hookers in mind. So I got this idea as a joke on Twitter because of the idea, like how do you make the dragon ride, like the boy in his dragon story? How do you like make that different? Like,
I'm gonna turn it on its head.
The boy riding the dragon rides the boy, and I tweeted that.
Hey, this is a family stream,
and I'm like, this is kind of a funny idea. And then I got like more ideas to hook into it, and I'm like, I'm gonna have to write this now. Oh God.
It's like Jim Butcher in this. Was it Cinder Spire or whatnot? He was
behind that. I know the story behind the Pokemon and the Romans. Right. His other series, the Codex Alera.
Codex Alera,
yeah. It's like a bear.
He's like, you don't think I can write that? Here, 6-book series. I'm just like, yeah. The way I kind of pitched it to people is just like I'm not a big like multiverse person. But I pitch it as people as like, it's like comic books. Like I want people to like, when they talk about my series, like, who's your favorite character? You know? So it's a bunch of different characters that are open up the world a little bit. Then this character opens up the world a little bit, you know, instead of just writing 1,000-page book, you know, I'll write a bunch of 300-page books, and the world just opens up. And so I don't really have an end to the series, but there'll be arcs. Will be a trilogy here, then a trilogy there, then a standalone here and a standalone there. You know,
I love that.
People are usually say that I'm doing it wrong, which is fine. I'm not objecting to anyone, but like this idea of, I'm sorry, a 25-book series, 1, 2, 3, 4 to 3, like, and everyone's like, no, it should be like a couple of trilogies and maybe some novellas, and then a side character. I'm like, no. On one story. It's not popular, but the beauty of being an indie writer, this is one thing that people don't talk about, I feel, enough, is that, why did Richard Kadri have to write a knockout from the first book? Because he had to pitch a book, right? And like, no publisher's going to say, I'll let you write 12 books about Sandman Slim.
Right.
Who's going to give you that contract, Richard, unless you're Stephen King, right? It's never going to happen. You have to write a standalone that's going to knock it out of the park, and then hope they they buy a sequel, right?
Yeah, and that's what I think they did. That's what I think that Richard Kadri did, and
It suffered. It suffered. Sandman Slim would have been better if he hadn't saved the world in book one.
Well, and this is what I told him. Like, I love when Sandman is at a low level, when it's a smaller conflict, and you get to actually get inside of his head, and we're not worried about hell rising up and all this, And then his book, now he wants it to be a series, but it's a standalone right now. Is The Grand Dark? It's one of my favorite books of all time. And it's amazing, and it's not world ending, And was it Larry Carrera is the Monster International guy, and he did the same thing too. Like, blew it out. His book was like 800 pages, and then every book after that has been smaller and smaller and smaller. And I'm like, because you're not trying to blow the world up every time, Right.
Booker series really foundational to you as a writer. I'm going to say Dresden.
Yeah, Dresden and Andrzej Sapkowski's The Witcher. Those are like my two things that I blend together for my universe.
Whether I want it or not, it's built in. Terry Brooks is built into my DNA. And there's a lot of different versions of Terry and the stories that he tells. So, but I like the clean, clear, forward-moving aspect of his writing style that got better over time. And so I would say more than anything else is that. And then I'll also say Name of the Wind is critical for me because it got me back into fantasy, because I had kind of I hadn't read anything I liked for like 2 years. I just kind of gave up on it. And then somebody handed me, I have no idea who handed me that book, but it was just like, oh, this is possible. Okay, I'm good. You go back to that for inspiration anytime you like.
Yeah. Robert Kirkman a lot of comic book writers meant a lot to me. Robert Kirkman's Invincible was usually, and I'm not a Walking Dead fan, but Invincible's a super.
Rufus Withdrawal.
Huh?
It's only been 12 years.
Yeah. We both had put out videos about Patrick Rothfuss and whether and our feelings about the ethical dilemma that is years for book 3.
Oh, man.
Joseph, you and I both put out videos on that.
Yeah. Do authors owe you something?
Yeah, you did one like.
While we're here, what do you guys think about that?
No. Sorry. It's their work from their head. And, I can have whatever feelings I want to about it, but he doesn't owe me a damn thing. He owes it to himself to finish the damn thing, right? Just like George R.R. Martin does. But as far as me stamping my feet and saying, give it to me now, it's just like you're a girl inside Willy Wonka's chocolate factory. Relax.
Well, what do you guys like? I mean, I know we're not even 100th of the level of Rothfuss, but what do you guys feel like? Like, I don't know how much interaction you guys have with people who read your stuff, but what do you guys feel like personally, as far as giving readers the next thing or the next level of your story? Do you feel like I need to get this to people? Or are you like, I'm going to write what I'm going to write when I'm going to write it?
Yeah, to me, it's like giving them a cake that's half baked. What's the point? Right? Finish the cake, make it good, have a couple of people taste it, make sure the icing looks right, put the candles on top, give me a bride and a groom that look like the bride and groom. Now you can have it.
I'm going to disagree. So I think that when you say I'm releasing a trilogy, this is book 1, you are promising I'm going to finish the trilogy. Just like if a painter comes to my house and I say I'm going to paint all the rooms in the house. That's our contract. We signed a contract. Does he do it all in one day? No. First day he comes in, he paints the kitchen. And I've used this. I made the same analogy in my video. Does that mean he's going to definitely finish the job? No. Maybe he can't. Maybe he gets in a car accident on the way home from that first day and breaks his legs, and he can't finish, or he can't finish for a while. But I expect him to try really hard. And
Yeah.
there isn't a reason like he broke his legs. He was not in an accident. If he just says, I don't feel like finishing your house, breaking the promise. Now, does that mean he's the worst person on earth? Does that mean we blackball the guy, we say bad things about him, we yell at him in the street? None of that's appropriate, right? No one should be like going to George R. R. Martin and like yelling at him for not writing the next book. But I feel like he owes us another book. In this he made a promise. He promised to write another book, and it's not there. He may have a good reason to have not finished it. And maybe I just can't come up with the right ideas. It's not working. It's not coming together. And then I think the guy owes us publicly to say that and to apologize. The same way, if my painter doesn't come back and finish the second room, he owes me a phone call. I'm sorry, Joe. I didn't come and finish your house. So that's the analogy for me. And I do feel like I owe my readers, more books and a conclusion. I joke about 25 books, but I need to wrap it up. I need to end the series. And maybe that means ending it in fewer than 25 books. But, yeah.
Well, my whole thing is like I guess we'll never know unless, hopefully, cross our fingers, right? We end up in those shoes of Rothfuss, who got like a $5 million, bonus or whatever to write the next book, and then George R. R. Martin, who's worth $100 million now. It's like we won't know like how we'll feel about it, because I'm not knocking people who write video games. I'm sure it's labor intensive. But I'm going to err on the side of it's easier than writing a 1,200 page sixth and seventh book, and so he's like, okay, you're going to pay me $10 million to write a video game. Sure. I'll do that rather than trying to work on a 1,200 page, another novel
that has already been over criticized again and again and again while you were busy being the producer on one of the most popular television shows in the world.
It's like, I put enough pressure on myself, and I'm at this point, we are nobody to George, right? But it's like, I have this thing inside me. It's like, well, I told people that, like Joe said, like I told people I'm going to write more books. So I want to get these books out as fast as I can, as well made as I can possibly afford to make it well made to you guys, So if I'm taking too long, luckily I've got a book out every, 2 years. And then I've also got audiobooks out to kind of, all right, you guys know I'm doing something, I'm talking to you guys, I'm out here on YouTube letting you know how things are going, So, if they're talking to us and we're communicating, like Jim Butcher has his like little bar across his website that says, this much percentage completed on this book, let us know how it's going. We can understand, like, if you get in a car wreck, I'm not going to be like, well, wait, while you're in the hospital, you got nothing but time,
Right. It's with any kind of thing where if you break a promise, there are valid excuses, and there are a sense where you can just apologize. And we don't know what these guys' mental health is really like. My issue with Patrick Rothfuss is like, I feel like when you wait 10 years to write a book, you're a different person.
Yeah.
Like, you've changed so much. Like, how do you even finish a series that you wrote 12, 13 years ago? If he had been writing a book every 2 years and he was now on book 9, you expect a series to sort of change over time and shift over time as the author matures. But when you wait 12 years, it's almost like you've done something. It's hard to come back from that. And like, I don't know what's going on with the guy. And maybe he has a perfectly valid excuse. Like, he probably does, right? But I feel like we should hear it. Or something, and instead his attitude seems to be to sort of not apologize. I don't know. I'm not intimately familiar with everything the guy says publicly, but there was a whole issue. You know the issues. I don't want to bring it up again. It's pointless.
I'm terribly sorry, but I've got about one more minute before I need to jump into the Spiffbo scoreboard.
Spiffbo scoreboard.
All of us have done Spiffbo at this point. Ta-da! I can't wait to be cut in the first round.
Yes, thank you. We'll give AR and Joe a good plug to out themselves. But yes, thank you all for coming. And AR, go ahead and plug what you got coming up, book wise, video wise, what you're going to.
My name is A.R. Witham, and you need to buy Wistful Asending by JCM Berne. It is purple, it is yellow, and it's the most fun you'll have with a sci-fi book this year. Buy it.
Thank you, Andy. Very sweet.
And you can read Blackjack if you want to.
Yeah.
And you can go watch his other live he's about to go to.
Yeah.
If you want to plug it.
Oh no, you don't need to play. We've been doing a Spiffbo 9 readathon where you didn't have to read Spiffbo 9, but all the Spiffbo 9 books were worth a bonus point. So we've got a lot of great booktubers that have been being team captains during the month of July. So they've been awesome, and it's cool. Spiffbo is great because it gives independent authors a chance to be seen by a bunch of people, and the books that do bubble to the surface get a lot of attention, which is fantastic.
Joe, what can we see from you coming up?
JCM Berne. You should read Legend of Blackjack. It's fun and a standalone. I have 2 books coming out next. Shadow of Hyperion, book 4, and the Hybrid Helix should be out hopefully sometime in September. Hopefully, and then I have a fantasy called Partial Function that is being edited right now, so could be out a couple months, and Sarah could tell me to start from scratch. I don't really know what's going to happen.
Sarah will never do that.
Hey guys, I appreciate all you and everybody's watching. Check out the Patreon, do all that. Check out my book, my new cover just came out, all those good stuff. But also, more importantly than that, you need to get Legend of Blackjack and Wistful Asending because they're awesome. And check out these guys. They both have YouTube channels. They both have multiple books out, and they got some audio out there too if you want to check out and listen to AR's smooth voice. But yeah,
WITHAM.
Hey, thank you everybody for hanging out with us, and we will see you in the next